All right, next item in today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. A Washington state supervisor at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, DCYF, whose name is Jeanette Obelts. She is speaking out in her capacity as president of WFSC, the Washington Federation of State Employees, and their local 889 about the devastating consequences of the Keeping Families Together Act, which has created a very high bar to be able to remove children from homes of parents who may be drug addicted or otherwise neglectful, abusive. Um, Many times, so it is, of course, related to the drug epidemic that we have. So, this was a law passed in 2021, the Keeping Families Together Act, which increased that bar for taking kids from homes to the point now that even if the caseworker said they pay a visit to a home, maybe it's a family member who says, "You better check on this kid. I know, the parents are in active drug abuse. There's neglect. I've seen things. It's bad. Check it out." They go and pay a visit. They can even see drugs on the coffee table and maybe evidence that that child is otherwise being abused or neglected. And that alone is not a high enough bar to remove children from the home any longer in the state of Washington. And it has led to an alarming increase in critical incidents where children are killed, where children are left to die, and it's something that lawmakers have been trying to sound the alarm on for the last several sessions that I've been down in Olympia. Now, I want to show you this video. We're not turning up the sound on this because there's a lot of foul language in it, but this was put up in the last couple of days on Instagram by someone who was in Seattle and witnessed a guy with a tiny baby strapped to his chest. I'm not going to put this man's name out there, but according to a state lawmaker and a caseworker here, this 41-year-old man, was arrested back in April on theft, identity theft, trafficking and stolen property, and some other charges. And then there was a dependency hearing scheduled as well because of this child. I don't know if he's a single dad. I have no idea what the situation is. But I'm told that his case went before Thurston County Superior Court Judge um, Sharonda Amamillo, who is a current Supreme Court candidate. Though her decisions would not have directly affected the dependency case, that would have been a different court. The criminal case would have gone before her. Now, I reached out today to ask her specifically about the case, if she'd seen the video. She did not want to respond directly to that, but I want to put up the response I received from her via email. And she said, "The case is held in open public court. There is nothing secret that happens in open court. People should watch court to learn more about the case. You may well know that a judicial officer is unable to engage in ex parte communication about an ongoing case. However, I have absolutely zero issues with the public logging in on Zoom and watching how the law is applied to each unique set of facts." I followed up again to say, "Well, will you at least confirm that, in fact, this guy is your client, or not your client, but, appeared in your court, that this was a case that you handled?" She did not respond to that. So I'm unable to independently confirm if the man in the video, in fact, is the same as this man who would have gone before her, seen in that video with the baby strapped to him. It's disturbing. Obviously, it appears he's either buying or using drugs. And, you've got a tiny baby that is very vulnerable. And so that is a huge concern. And this brings us back to this standard under the Keeping Families Together Act that is an imminent risk of physical harm. So you're going to hear now from this DCYF supervisor, but again, by the name of Jeanette Obels, who told me that they tried desperately back in 2021 to tell lawmakers this is a bad idea. I get that you're trying to make sure kids aren't taken from parents unfairly and that parents have the opportunity to, fix their own behavior, take parenting classes, maybe go to rehab. But there are too many cases, she says, where the children's needs, the children's rights are not being heard because of this high bar for removal. And she told me what she really thinks lawmakers are missing is the consideration of the really bad cases that she says caseworkers at DCYF are seeing all too often.
I think one of the things that really needs to be considered is the range, for lack of a better term, of the abuse and neglect that we see. I think that a lot of these laws are written with really good intentions, but not really with the idea that there are going to be some parents with really serious allegations against them. We see cases of sexual abuse. We see cases of torture. And another thing that the Washington State Supreme Court and the legislature has agreed on is that in any case, we're supposed to provide services to prevent removal. I don't know, and nobody has been able to tell me what service I put in place to return a child to a person who sexually abused them, um, or to a parent who knew that their child was being sexually abused and didn't protect them. I don't know what service I put in place for a parent who was intentionally withholding food from their child. Like those are things that 60 to 90 days of services are never going to be able to fix. And I don't think when these laws or these Supreme Court decisions are made that they are really thinking of those circumstances because who wants to think about it? Except for like crazy people who go into this work, apparently.
Now, she shared with me another concern based on a state law that was passed either that same year in 2021 or very near there, which I was not aware of. This law requires that kids that are removed from the home have to have a visit with a parent within the first couple of days. That may make sense in many cases, as Jeanette shared with me. It's traumatizing for a child removed from a home, even if they are being abused and neglected um, by that parent. But of course, they still love them, right? So that may make sense. But she said there are many situations where it's extremely traumatizing for that child being required to see the parent again, who they might have just shared some information with somebody else about. They might be very worried about seeing that parent again.
For most kids, it's really important for them to see their parents pretty quickly after removal because even if a kid is harmed by their parent, they still love them. That parent, in the vast majority of cases, still love their kid. It a lot of times can help, spark that fire to get into services and stuff too. So being able to do that more often, fantastic. Love it. It has made things easier for us. Um, but what it said, again, because we're not thinking about those most extreme cases, was that every parent must be offered a visit within 72 hours of removal. So that means I could have a child have a forensic interview where they disclose horrific abuse. And I have what the law says is that I have to have that child visit their parent, who they just made disclosures about, unless there's an emergency no contact order. However, we already established our courts don't have emergency hearings. So we can't get an emergency no contact order. And again, I think it's, as hard as we lobbied that session, as much as we, as union members, tried to explain this is not how our courts work, this is not how our system works, we were we weren't listened to. And I don't think the vast majority of people in Washington want their, we're public servants. I don't think they want their public servants asking a 6-year-old to go visit their parent who sexually abused them.
So, in Jeanette's high position with WFSE, She will certainly be back in Olympia this next session, she told me. Other lawmakers, including Representative Travis Couture and Representative Josh Penner, two of the Republicans I know who have tried in recent sessions to amend the Keeping Families Together Act and amend that imminent physical harm standard to make it easier when caseworkers identify kids who need to be protected, need to be removed from homes, that there isn't such a high bar and they don't take a case to court and a judge says, can't really help you here. There's not imminent physical harm to this kid just because there were drugs on the coffee table when you walked in or just because there was rotting food in the fridge. It's not enough in Washington now. So I know there's going to be continued efforts and a lot of pressure in this next legislative session to fix this, and we'll be there to cover it. So thank you for watching today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. We hope to see you again on Friday morning. Until then, have a great rest of your day.